Well, I got my ICs yesterday, my 74 HC 4040s, and this morning these arrived in my mailbox. They went to someone else's house in the neighborhood, and then I looked out and I could see my flag is down on my mailbox. See, I have two flags on my mailbox. One to tell the mailman there's mail, and the other flag, if anyone opens my mailbox up, it triggers a flag. Now, also this morning I received a long email from a person that says he basically screams at my emails. Now, he's the guy that did a lot of Huff and Puff stuff, and he says he screams at my videos because I say that the frequencies for the Huff and Puff are basically for UK and Belgium. Okay, now I consider 80 meters, 40 meters, what's it, 80, 40, there's 75 in between, and 10 meter band was very popular when I was growing up. It's the bands that I'm familiar with. Also, a lot of the guys at the ham flea markets had the handy talkies, whatever frequency they're on. I don't consider the 60 meter band to be a United States band. Now, he gave me the date that it was 2002, and I don't know where. I'm not going to go read the article, but I said honestly, from what I view, I started off saying I want to build a Huff and Puff to stabilize 80 meters and 40 meters. That's what I started off. I wasn't going for 60. And I mentioned that right away I realized that all these schematics were coming from other countries. And I figured out that it was a different band. I didn't find any US ones. Also, he mentioned certain things. I keep showing this one schematic. The thing is, I found that schematic after I already figured out that the circuit that I built didn't work, the one chip one. And I wrote him, and he said, it's not a good one, it doesn't work right. Well, put a freaking disclaimer right on the schematic. Say it's only for intellectual purposes and thought processes, whatever you want to call it. It's not ready for prime time. Several of your circuits are not ready for prime time. Okay? No matter how you cut it. Well, when you really understand how a Huff and Puff works, I don't. I only understand it to a certain level. You understand it much deeper than me, but yet you put out circuits that aren't ready for prime time. So I found the Holy Grail one, and that guy has a whole different attitude. He's got a whole PDF file saying, I tried this, I tried that, this is what I found. That helped me the most. Okay? And then I also found the Huff and Puff simulator program by the one guy. And I run that, and you can see that the steps get bigger. But right now, I have welds. I took it back apart, but I'm redoing it. I've got a way to do 80 meters, and that's the goal. Okay, and that's why I mentioned those other frequencies. They're not important to me. I don't know if you can use it in the United States, but where did it originate? Why are all the Huff and Puff circuits for 5 megacycles and 9? Okay, maybe there was a bunch of receivers that came out that were very drifty, but I consider those frequencies for other countries. Okay, I'm an 80 meter guy. I've always listened to 80 meters. That's the band if I ever got a license I'd want to be on, and because just before bedtime, that band works very well at night. And the other bands you'd have to be home from work to use to get the propagation. Okay, that's how I view it. If you don't like it, I can't help you. I did contact you and I asked you about the circuit, and you really didn't answer me. And then later on, you did, and I did find the schematic that I always show. I won't show it anymore. Basically, that XOR gate, that's bogus. Okay, it's not a good design. Look at it. Look at it carefully. It's getting this power from an output of a chip. Okay, go look at an XOR gate using 2 transistors and how that would operate in that same circuit. It would have more oomph to it, but you did it your way, and I won't say it's total bogus, but it's close to bogus. Okay, whenever I used to give schematics to people, I used to really go over the thing, and a really good circuit, it's almost impossible for it not to work. And I always show you that Franklin oscillator circuit. And I found that thing to be, no matter how many times I wired one of them, it came right on. There was no trickery. There was no playing with any components. There was no, this or that. But you can't assume anything. All right, that's what I found with this whole project, the whole thing. And I mentioned that the 6040 chip, you can't get certain outputs out of it. So use a 4040. They have other numbers before, the 4040 or the 4060. But that's what my goal is. I'm showing you what I go through and my view of what I'm finding. And I dig, but I don't go figure out, well, gee, it's 60 meters. I wonder who's using 60 meters. All I knew was that frequency wasn't what I wanted. So I went looking for 80 meters. And nobody seemed to make a stabilizer for 80 meters. And then I found the Holy Grail site, which his name's Danny. And Danny has a different attitude. All right, he's not a great designer. Okay, he toughs it out like I do. Okay, and he wanted a Huff and Puff that did a wide range of frequencies. So he stayed with it, and I stayed with it. And then you say, well, you guys don't really understand how the circuit actually works. No, we don't. Danny has a better a grasp of it than I do. I didn't want to get this deep into this thing. This was supposed to be a project that I wired up real quick, and I threw it into my next receiver. Okay, and that's what it was supposed to be. And instead, I built your one chip stabilizer, which doesn't work. It needs a disclaimer on there. And when I got it, I got it as a schematic off the internet. I only found your website later on. I've had it already built, and then when I had problems, I tracked down whose it was. I found your name, and then I emailed you. Okay, and then you say, well, it's for 10 megacycles approximately. Yeah. Well, I didn't know that. I had a schematic because a lot of your schematics have been wiped clean. People wipe your name off it and they put their name on it. Okay, because you're the guy. Okay, but I find problems with your circuitry. You're cutting corners so much, you're causing problems. Okay, and then with discussing CMOS chips and the way I was getting a little tongue-tied there because I'm very tired. I put a lot of time into this. Okay, and I'm still continuing to put time in it, but I'm dropping back. Now that I got it to lock, I understand how I can make it lock. And the oscillator actually works from 3 megacycles to 8, and it has locking points. And they're not always usable further up in the frequency, but they'll be okay. In other words, for any shortwave station that might be up there, if you lock, say, 80 hertz off, it'll be fine, okay, and it'll stay locked 80 hertz off from frequency. But I basically got what I want. I wanted it to lock the best at 80 meters, and I do listen to I think it's 75 meters. A lot of phone guys up in there, really good clear phones at night. And I listen to them, and a lot of times they're political, and I turn it off. And other times they're telling a funny story, and I leave it on. Okay. Now I also found out that my command radio, after that warms up, it holds really good. And that's one of the things I'm going to measure is the oscillator on that thing after it's been heating up for, like, say, an hour. And then you mentioned in your letter about me picking on that little frequency counter, about it, the last digit bobbling, and you mentioned blah, blah, blah. I have an HP, and it doesn't bobble. Okay? That's why I went after this thing. The HP is over 30 years old, and that digit doesn't bobble. So after all these years, with a microprocessor, there's a heated crystal oscillator in this thing, it shouldn't bobble on that last digit, which would be 10 hertz digit. Yeah, the 10 hertz digit. Okay, and if you read the instructions for that display from eBay, it's good for 100 hertz. Right there, it's telling you it's junk. It's got a microprocessor on there, a heated crystal, and a crystal oscillator, and it drifts more than the old, probably 40-year-old HP with a single crystal that's not heated. Okay, but it is what it is. Okay, because I have reference oscillators here. They're ICs. They're heated. You just add voltage to them, and then you can put you can put your frequency counters on there and see how accurate they are. And I have ways to calibrate stuff, and that eBay frequency counter is not that great, but you just have to accept it. It's no big deal. Once you get a lock on the frequency, you got a lock. But they basically use the frequency counter to give you an idea where the hell you are on the band. Okay, that's where we're at. But like I said, you scream at my videos, and I scream at your schematics. And your stuff is so prolific, or it's so copied so much all over the internet. And like I said, when I got the schematics first, your name wasn't even on them to start off with. And then I went digging. I dig, and I found schematics with the thing, and I contacted you, and then I kept digging, and then I found I think your website or whatever, and then I realized who you are. And then I started looking. I'm like, well, I must be doing something wrong, but I wasn't. You need to put a disclaimer on the one chip Huff and Puff, or high speed Huff and Puff. You went too low on the component count. Okay, you have your what you try to do in life, and I have what I try to do. I try to tell people, watch out for this, watch out for this. Here's the solution to this. It's like someone emailed me today. Again, I got a couple of emails this week thanking me for telling people how to set the trims on the Blade 70S. And I read the instructions, and after you read the instructions, you still don't know how to set the trims. But anyway, I did a video, and it's helping people. Not everybody interprets the instructions the same way that I do. I interpreted the instructions. I knew how to move the trim. I've shown in the video an old, now I've got a Craft remote control, and how a trim used to work, and I show it alongside the new one, and the new one is digital. And I put a lot of thought into that video, having done it a second time. And that's what I am. I'm the guy that says, watch out for this, watch out for that. This is what I'm working on. This is what I found. And I tell people, keep digging in the internet. And sometimes maybe I don't dig deep enough. Okay? But I found the schematic for a one chip Huff and Puff. I built it exact with all exact parts, and it didn't even work right. It didn't. So I started thinking maybe it's a different frequency range. I had the scope out, and then I contacted you, and you basically told me it was a piece of crap. And you should put a disclaimer on it. But that's not going to help the fact that that schematic has been wiped, and it's all over the internet, and there's people building it. Guy just did, I think it was this morning or yesterday, he mentioned he built it and it didn't work. The part count is too low on that, and that's doing damage. People build something that doesn't work right, and I get the reason why you built that, but you should have kept those thoughts to yourself and not publish the schematic and put it up there. Well, it does work under certain. That's not what you should publish. Okay, it's not bad karma. Well, anyway, it's not a good thing to do, because people don't forget stuff like that. And I know you're screaming it because, it's a very deep rabbit hole. It's a very steep learning curve, and I'm explaining stuff the best I can for what I understand at that moment. Okay, now you can send me this giant letter, and it was really long, just like you said it would be. And people like you always say that this letter is going to be really long, and I'm like, oh, one of these guys. Okay, and I know I misspeak. I know I don't have a perfect handle on this, but I'm building this thing for 80 meters. Okay, and that's a big difference in component values as compared to the new bands, 5 megacycles, and what was it, 9, whatever, 60 meters, whatever you called it. I have no interest in those bands. Okay, there's probably on the new transmitters that they sell, the new digital ones, probably have that band built into it. I have no interest in that. This is for someone that wants to build an oscillator that doesn't drift in 80 meters, so they can put it in a homemade receiver, whether it's a direct conversion or a super hat. Now, there's schematics out there. There are people that build direct conversion sets for 40 and 80 meters, and this Huff and Puff would be perfect in there. Okay, that's what my thoughts are. I know there's enough people with enough interest in that area. I'm not looking to improve it for 5 megacycles and 9 megacycles, whatever it is, those bands. I'm old. I'm not going to learn what those frequency of those bands are, and I have no interest. I'm a 80 meters. All the circuits I build are for 80 meters, 40 meters. The shortwave band in between, that's my interest. And I tell people that. And they can watch, oh, watch my video and you say, oh, this guy isn't building it for the new bands. Well, leave, go build it yourself. You know, go buy one of those fancy digital rigs where everything's done for you. There's no opening it up. There's no, but it's just CB radio. That's what it comes down to. Okay, you didn't learn code. So you basically got a CB radio that's on different frequencies. And you're yelling and screaming by now, but that set right there can be replaced with a cell phone. There's so many things that can be replaced with a cell phone. And you have to understand that people have different kinds of interests. And my interest is 80 meters, and I tell people straight out. And then they start to go look at the website, Danny's website, which I call the Holy Grail, because he did the work and he documented what he did. Now he's been asking me, have I read how a Huff and Puff works that he documented? No, I haven't read that yet. I got to where I wanted to get to on that. I keep mentioning that. I wanted to build a circuit that the oscillator wouldn't drift. I really don't want to dig deep in how it works. And I learned just enough, and some people say just enough to be dangerous. Okay, you can say that, but I learned just enough to make it work in the situation that I want it to work. Okay, because I'm an experimenter, I'm an electronic technician. The schooling I has was junior engineering, but I went to tech school to learn to be a repairman, and I've repaired TV radios, VCRs, but also aircraft avionics stuff, computers. There's other things, modems, printers, all the other stuff, and that's what I want to do. And I did over the years find solutions to problems on things because I have a certain way of doing stuff, and I don't get too complicated with things. Yeah, you learn how this circuit works really good in your head, and there's no use for it. I figured out what are the components you have to change when you go down in frequency. And like I said, originally the divide by chip, I went the wrong way with the amount of divide bys. And then I found out my 4060 wouldn't allow me to have certain outputs that I wanted. So that's when I've reordered 4040s. Let's call them 4040s and 4060s. There's other numbers like 74HC 4040, 74HC 4060. Okay? It's not that hard. And then and this here, I have both a 50 megacycles. I have a 50 and I have a 60. And I can make changes, and I know to keep the wires short. Some of this is just, I added in an IC, the 74HC86, because the DTL circuit that's been provided and the one schematic is bogus. I told the guy it's near bogus, but it's basically bogus. When you go to bigger capacitors, when you go down to 80 meters, you're going to need bigger caps on the output, and you're going to need the oomph of this IC versus the DTL. That's what I found. Maybe different. I might be putting wires in the wrong places, but this is how I do things, and I always do them that way. And you can call me a crank or half-baked. You can call me anything you want. Okay? But I did contact you originally because I had a schematic of yours that was wiped. And later on, I found the page that in your letter you mentioned. If you were to look at I didn't have that page. If you would have looked at, I didn't have that page. Yeah, I show it in the video because I'm not using the one that's wiped. But anyway, that's how it went. You got to realize that your stuff is out there everywhere. And people have wiped your name off it and put their name on it and redrawn it. It's a nightmare for anyone that's trying to track it down. And I can track it down. And I tracked your name down, and I asked you a question, and you didn't answer it. And then I asked you again, because I didn't have the page that you'd say, well, it's on the page. Well, I didn't have that page, okay? I had one of the schematics that had your name on it, and the schematic with your name on it, but not the information that I had to ask you for. And then I did find that. I kept digging, and it popped up, and I found it. But you got to look at from where I'm coming from, okay? It's very easy, like to scream at the screen and why aren't you saying this? Why do you keep saying the UK? Because that's how I perceive it, okay? I perceive 80 meters 40 80, even 40, someone told me is basically, well, anyway, 80, 40, and 10 was very popular when I was growing up. And I only pay a certain amount of attention to ham radio, and I can hear everything I want to hear, including that you saw my spinning fax drum. I've gone further than most ham operators go. Now there was Ralph Taggart. I communicated with him a few times. He was a ham operator, and he got into fax machines. And then I figured out that I could use a stepping motor to drive the drum instead of a fancy geared down AC motor. I come up with some ideas, and I made it simpler. And I contacted him a few times by email. I don't know if he's still alive, but he's done some pretty, and he's very nice. He understands how I think a little bit better than a lot of people. You know, whenever you go into a new area in electronics, there's a steep learning curve. And then as I'm talking, some of the stuff I am learning after I've said it, but there's no way to go back and fix every one of those videos. Like you keep saying, why do you keep saying the UK and all that? That's how I perceived it, okay? And I've said it. And it's not a real popular item in the United States. Now, people in, I guess, the United States, all the new guys, they're buying digital rigs, and they don't care what's inside. They just want to talk to somebody. It's basically a CB radio that goes further. And they take a test and rules and regulations, and they have basically a CB radio. I think that's it. All right, that's it.